Let's talk about the American South between 1800 and 1848. It's a place and a time that's so wrapped up in myth, it's often hard to see the reality. But the real story, well, it's an enigma. So we're going to unravel this mystery, how a tiny, powerful elite managed to shape an entire region's identity, often against the interests of most of its own people.
When you picture the Old South, what comes to mind? You're probably thinking of this, right? These huge, grand plantations, the whole Gone with the Wind scene. But the reality? It was actually this. The vast majority of Southerners were what we call yeoman farmers, working their own small plots of land. Their lives looked nothing like the Hollywood myth.
I mean, check out these numbers. It's kind of staggering. A full 75%, three-quarters, of white Southern families owned no enslaved people at all. And that massive planter elite, the ones with the big plantations, they were only 3% of families. Just 3%. Think about that.
Okay, so that right there, that's the big puzzle, isn't it? If the overwhelming majority of the population wasn't part of this plantation system, how on earth did this tiny little elite manage to run the whole show? Well, that's exactly the question we're here to answer.
Yeah, this is what historians sometimes call the Southern paradox. And it gets even crazier, because for a lot of those small farmers, the whole system of slavery actually hurt them economically. That made it tougher to compete. Some of them even wanted to abolish it. So how did the elite keep control and squash that kind of dissent?
All right, to figure this out, we've got to look at what set the stage. It all comes down to three things: the land, a huge westward migration, and one single crop that changed, well, everything.
So think of it like a chain reaction, right? One thing leads to another. First up, you've got the soil. In places like Virginia, decades of tobacco farming just completely wore it out. That forced planters to look for fresh land out west. So they moved their entire operations, and tragically they forcibly moved thousands and thousands of enslaved people with them, into the super fertile lands of the Deep South. And right at that exact moment, the invention of the cotton gin made a new kind of cotton unbelievably profitable. This created a ravenous hunger for both land and labor. King Cotton was born, and it became the engine that just supercharged the expansion of slavery.
Okay, so the economic stage is set. Now, we can really dig into the elite's playbook. And this stuff wasn't an accident, believe me. These were deliberate, interlocking strategies that a tiny minority used to get total control over the majority.
It was basically a three-part strategy. Step 1, grab all the political power. Step 2, make everyone else economically dependent on you. And step 3, and this might be the most powerful part, create a shared ideology that ties all white Southerners together. Let's break down exactly how they did it.
First, politics. And their power was basically baked into the U.S. Constitution from the get-go. The Three-Fifths Compromise meant that Southern states got way more representatives in Congress than they should have based on their voting population. And that extra political muscle? It let this tiny group of elite slaveholders wield huge power and shape the nation's laws to protect their institution.
All right, part 2 of the playbook, economic control. Imagine you're a small farmer. If you have a bad harvest, who do you go to for a loan? The big planter down the road. If you need to get your crops to market, whose wagons and warehouses do you use? His. They controlled the whole system, top to bottom, and that gave everyone else a huge incentive to just play along and not cause any trouble.
But, political muscle and economic control, that's still not enough to hold an entire society together. The real glue, the thing that cemented the elite's control, was something way more powerful. It was an idea.
And that powerful, all-encompassing idea was white supremacy. The planter elite pushed this ideology hard, starting around the 1830s. The goal was to unify all white people. It was a way to say, hey, it doesn't matter if you're a rich planter or a poor farmer with no land, we're on the same team. It completely papered over the huge economic differences between them and created this sense of solidarity that was just crucial for keeping the system in place.
And this whole ideological push led to a really dramatic and frankly pretty shocking shift in thinking. The South basically stopped apologizing for slavery and started defending it with this new, aggressive, and completely unapologetic attitude.
Just look at the difference here. A lot of the founding fathers, even the ones who owned enslaved people, they called slavery a necessary evil. It was this unfortunate thing they were stuck with that maybe would fade away someday. But by the 1830s, whoa, that language is gone. The new argument is that slavery isn't an evil, it's a positive good, the very cornerstone of their superior way of life.
And you can hear this new aggressive defense perfectly in the words of a major political figure at the time, John C. Calhoun.
He actually said, "I hold that the relation now existing is, instead of an evil, a good, a positive good." He was arguing that this system was essential for creating a wealthy, civilized, and stable society.
Now, this didn't just happen in a bubble, right? The rest of the world was starting to move against slavery. So when Great Britain freed all the enslaved people in its colonies in 1834, that sent a huge shockwave through the South. And how did they react? Did they question things? Nope. They did the opposite. They dug their heels in even deeper and defended their peculiar institution more fiercely than ever before.
Okay, so let's put all these pieces together. You've got these huge economic forces, this really smart political playbook, and this powerful unifying ideology. And it all comes together to create this very distinct, very dug-in Southern identity.
And really, this was the masterstroke of the elite's strategy. They managed to convince an entire population, most of whom, remember, didn't own a single enslaved person, that slavery wasn't just about economics. No, it was the absolute foundation of their entire way of life, their culture, their society, everything. Defending slavery became the same as defending their very existence.
So at the end of the day, what this whole story shows us is this incredibly complex web where economic interests and powerful ideas get tangled up to unite a group of people, sometimes even against their own best interests. And that kind of leaves us with a big question for today, doesn't it? How do those same forces, the needs of an economy and the power of a story, still intertwine to shape the world we live in right now?